wanted to just quickly introduce myself because I'm here today at Holden Taylor. If you are a Holden Taylor client or came through that channel, I'm new around here doing some consulting work. So I'm Samantha. A little bit about my background is I'm a registered financial and retirement advisor. I spent most of my career in the bank. I managed at a bank. I did senior advising. I then went into private wealth management and spent a bunch of time there. Got my insurance license, did financial planning, was still selling investments. And fast forward, I found that my best fit clients were not the clients who were coming to private wealth management at the time. They were more of the average human being who was looking for that same level of advice, but didn't necessarily have the minimums to have that quality of advice. And as many people may or may not know, hopefully there's no bankers in the room. Banks don't have the time of day for you, and I can affirm that through and through. So I started my own company called Worthy of Wealth because I genuinely believe that every single person is worthy of living a wealthy life. And often the thing that keeps people back is things like shame, anxiety, being afraid to ask for help. So that's a bit of my mission. Something really cool about me as well is that I took a trauma of money certification course. So I have a little bit of a background in addressing the relationship side of money, the emotional and softer side of money, and really going to the core. And why that's so important is if you think about it, I can give you a plan. And let's talk about like food for a second. I can give you the most perfect nutrition and fitness plan, or maybe not me, the expert. But will you do it? Is the biggest question. And unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, most of us won't. And that comes down to accountability and support. And so I bring that into my practice where I help people. I give you the plan, but I work with you the whole way through. So that's something a little unique about me where I do advice-only planning for a fee. And Crystal and I met about a year ago at a speaking event, and we've become very close since. And she's welcomed me into this beautiful practice. So that's just a little bit about me. And yeah, I do a lot of financial planning, but with an emphasis on the coaching side. And my specialty really is in values-based planning. So we talk a lot about what means the most to you, not just what you should do, because I don't care what you think you should do. Like if you want a house cleaner, have a house cleaner. If you want to cook, hire someone to come in and cook for you, do it. Absolutely. It doesn't matter what stigmas and biases there are. It's about you and your goals. So that's a little bit about me. And today I'm going to be talking about Investing 101 and the basics. And where that starts is understanding that you are your most important bill payment. At the end of the day, nobody is going to come save you. Unfortunately, we all wish that they would. The government's not going to save us. Our friends are not going to save us. It's up to us to make the decision to take our financial lives into our own hands. And that starts by prioritizing ourselves. So the same way you pay NMAX and your mortgage, you should be paying yourself. And that starts with investing and lots of other things. So today what we're going to start with is why we invest. I believe with everything that I do, education is mandatory. I think that, again, it goes back to the point of I can give you a plan, but unless you truly understand the why behind it, I don't think that you're going to be able to follow through on that in the long term. So we're going to start today by teaching some of the basics. Now, we probably have a wide array of understanding in this room, so bear with me here. Maybe you are an expert, and I so hope that I can teach you something new. And if you are just starting out fresh, I also think that you're going to get a lot out of this. So to start, why we invest, the most important thing is not just because you should, because everyone invests, because I'm told that we should invest. That's not it. The reason why we invest actually is for very specific mathematical reasons. One is to outpace inflation, which we're going to get into, the power of compounding growth, retirement, and being able to support ourselves. And so what that looks like, I mentioned inflation is the first one and arguably one of the biggest. Also, really quick fun fact about me, I do everything super colorful, fun. I use analogies. I think it brings a certain element to finance that no one has ever seen before. And I'm a very visual person, and hopefully it'll land for you as well. This is my inflation monster. And inflation is just that, it is a monster. Essentially, people have learned very quickly throughout COVID that inflation has been rampant. So history shows us typically inflation is around an average of 3%. With COVID, that's bumping up a little bit to about 3.15%. And why that's relevant is because if you were to just grab a bunch of cash and stuff it under your mattress, or say you just leave it in your checking account, you're actually going to effectively lose money year over year, because you are not keeping up with the rising cost of living and goods. And so this is where investing is not just something we should do. It's almost something we have to do. But we're never taught that necessarily, unless you have an amazing financial advisor in your corner. So this chart just really quickly shows you down here, we have cash, meaning that's just if we do nothing. We have the average inflation, which will eat away at your cash. And then you can see the massive difference when you invest over the long term. And so you saw that last line, the really cool, big looking line, and you're like, I want that line. The magic of compounding growth. So when it comes to investing, the reason why we want to invest is because it makes our $1 turn into $2, turn into $5, turn into $10, and so on. It compounds on top of each other. And the longer that you have on your side, the more it's going to grow. And so that's also why it's so important that we do this as soon as we are able. The sooner, the better. If you're about to turn 18 or you have a child who's about to turn 18, there is never a better time to introduce them to this. In the same breath, I do want to encourage you that it's never too late. Even if you only have 5 years left to retirement, that is 5 years on your side. Of course, we would like as much as possible so that we can get closer to this effect. But no matter what, time is going to be our best friend here. And then also, as you can see, the more you put in, the more it will grow. Math. And then retirement. Again, I said we are not just investing for no reason. We're not just investing because we should invest, but it's a fact that we need to be able to support ourselves. So rewind about 60-ish years or so, almost everybody had a pension. We didn't need necessarily to be saving for our own retirement. Between CPP and OAS, which are our government-funded pensions, you probably had an employer pension. Many grandparents, no matter your generation, honestly, if you think of your grandparent, they had some pretty sweet pensions. Unfortunately, those are dwindling year over year, and we're seeing less of them. And what that means is that you need to take it into your own hand. Really quick, just as an FYI, general numbers, the average cost of retirement is anywhere from $1 to $1.5 million, and that is after considering CPP and OAS. Down here, you'll see some numbers. This is the average CPP and OAS. There are some people who will say, I'm just going to live on Social Security. I worked my butt off my whole life. I'm just going to deal with it then. Unfortunately, we can't. Or sorry, you can, but what is your quality of life going to look like? What are the opportunities? You don't want to work your whole life just to be stuck in your house and not be able to do anything and have those experiences that you worked your whole life for. So we have to take it into our own hands because unfortunately that is the place that we are in, and that's where investing comes in. That's where investing can help us build more of our $1, our $10, our $100 a month and make it into something that we can live off in retirement. Again, these are just some other accounts that are retirement related, and we'll go into that a little bit more in detail later on. So then saving for retirement, I'm a numbers person. Everything I do is a combination of mindset and math, very similar to what Brianna talked about with her biases. Sometimes it's a numbers conversation, and other times there's other things like the intangibles we have to consider. But if you like your numbers and you are curious and you haven't started saving for retirement yet, depending on your age, these numbers are a good benchmark. Again, I'm an advocate for information is power, no matter where you're starting from. Let's rip that Band-Aid off. And even if it was a number like 25% and you're looking at that, being like, how the heck am I supposed to save 25% of my gross income right now? That is perfectly okay. We have a target, and that is what matters. At least we know where we're going and that we can make moves towards that. So again, everything that I do, if you haven't caught on to that, I like to bring the fun in finance, since it's such normally a taboo topic, but arguably probably one of the most powerful, important topics of our entire lives. Because as much as we don't want to admit it, money does control a lot of our lives. And if you think it doesn't, we can have that conversation later. Some really fun facts quickly here. So expect to spend about 70% of your pre-retirement income. If you're making $100,000 right now, your estimate would be about $70,000 in retirement. I can tell you based on clients I'm working with, I'm sure you guys could probably agree, it's often a bit higher.
Sometimes, yeah.
We
Especially the first years.
We find ways to replace our spending. So this actually, it wasn't in my slides, but I'd love to touch on this quickly. I like to teach 3 stages of retirement. There's our go-go years, our slow-go years, and our no-go years. A little true, right? So our go-go years, we're retired, we're like, heck yeah, I'm gonna do all of the things. You're probably spending quite a bit. We're having the vacation, we're buying the toys, we're doing all the things. Our slow-go years is when maybe we're not doing as much of that, but we're going into a phase of comfort. Maybe we're improving things within our house. Maybe we're joining local clubs. You're not necessarily cutting, but changing the way that you're spending. And then our no-go years, which we don't love to talk about, but unfortunately is something I hope more and more of us will talk about. No-go years is our health. It is the time of our life when we start not being able to do things for ourselves, and we probably need support. Is that somebody coming in to help? Is that putting in a chairlift? Is that a meal delivery service? Whatever that, or going into a retirement community, these are all really important considerations. A couple other fun facts if you haven't read them there. Over 54% of Canadians do not have a financial plan for retirement. I think all 3 of us would say we would absolutely love to change that stat. Yes. Again, CPP and OAS is not enough. And 32% of Canadians have no retirement savings at all.
Way too high.
Should be 0 in an ideal world. Another one of my favorite quotes right before we get into more of the tangible investing topics. Not investing is probably one of the most expensive mistakes that you could make. Again, just touching back on what Brianna said there, no action is action. Or sorry, inaction is an action of its own and arguably can actually be detrimental. So a lot of the noise right now is, you should do it this way, you should do it that way, oh no, you should do it this way. And I've heard from a lot of people that that's paralyzing because you want to do it right. But how do you do it right when everyone is telling you something different? And I'm going to admit that is very hard. And the key is to find someone you trust who can hold your hand to walk you through that. But I assure you, doing something, even investing at the bank in one of their mutual funds, I will argue 100% is better than not doing it at all. I really love that you're laughing. Thank you. I can tell you so much about the bank. Oh, that's for another day. Okay, so like I said, investing 101. We probably have a breadth of experience in this room, but I hope that you find value here. We're going to go through rapid fire here, some of the most important basics. Like I said, it's really important no matter what kind of advisor that you're working with, you have a base understanding of these topics and these fundamentals with investing. So we're going to start with time and risk. We're going to talk about investor personas. I have really fun analogies for investment houses and vehicles, diversification, asset allocation. Please don't let me lose you when I get to the more technical terms. We'll make it fun. And then we'll get into, okay, so then how do I invest? Where do I invest? Who do I invest with? So time equals risk. This is probably one of the hills that I will die on. I think one of the most misunderstood concepts when it comes to investing is risk. And what I often see is without proper advice, if I were to put this investor questionnaire in front of you, which when you're going to invest in a mutual fund, for instance, it's mandatory. We have to bring you through, it's called TOR, time horizon, objective, and risk. And we ask you a series of questions. And just for example, if I were to ask you, are you willing to lose 40% if the market dropped tomorrow? With no other education, you'd probably be like, heck no. Why would I want to do that? I'll tell you why in a minute, but essentially it's because of time. And because of that compounding growth, and because over a period of time, we end up on top. And the more time you have, the more risk you can afford. This will make a little bit more sense when we get to the next slide. Again, your goal is really important. So a really good example of this is retirement as one goal. If you have 30 years to retirement, You can afford to take risk. We have time on your side. If you are in retirement and actively withdrawing from your savings, your risk arguably is quite different, and we need to consider that. So that's where goals do come into play. So bear with me, okay? Everybody take a deep breath. I know, but I swear this is here for a reason. It is, but I'm going to explain this in 2 seconds. That'll make the most sense. So the stock market inception is down here in 1934. This goes all the way to 2024. What I want you to hone in on is out of all of these lines, which are just different risks of investments, no matter what, you are up. And so whether we're talking, and normally it's in, 10-year chunks is what we would prefer to zoom in on, but no matter what, whether you're in the highest risk, which we deem US stocks the highest risk, or you're in something like bonds, which people normally pick up on what bonds are, GICs, no matter what, no matter if it lost 40% 2 years over and over, you're still up in the long run. And this is why time is our best friend. And this is why we have to really understand that we can afford risk. And if you can afford risk, you cannot not afford to have that. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about risk and investments, we want to grow your money as much as possible. So the crazy slide's over. You can breathe now. Investor. So I'm really driving home this risk with you guys. Again, I like to really bring the fun. So I have some really fun names here. The reason why high risk Harriet is in a different color is because my philosophy is that everybody should be a high risk Harriet, unless you're very close to retirement, and then it's a different conversation. If you're very close to retirement and you're like, oh yeah, okay, Sam, so that means I'm a low risk Larry. Wrong, actually. And we're going to get to that a little deeper. But this is a really quick visual. We will get to a little bit more of what these are. Some of you in the room may look at this and you're like, yep, I know what all those are. And some of you may look at this and you're like, I have no idea what one of those are. So I'll explain that in a moment. But this, again, the color, if that helps to understand, again, I like to make those connections. We have fixed income and GICs and bonds as our lowest risk. And then we have individual stocks as our highest risk. So think about, again, going back to Brianna, GameStop, Bitcoin, NVIDIA. If you were to only put all of your money into just one stock, the risk is incredibly high because you're putting all your eggs in that one basket and you're doing this. I hope it works out. But there's a better way to do that. And that's where we want to find our balance in the middle. So investments. A lot of people, no matter the breadth of your knowledge, this one, believe it or not, still gets people. So if you know what a TFSA is, amazing, stick with me. But these are our main types of investments, and I like to describe them as houses. And the reason why is because sometimes I'll have clients come to me, and they're like, yeah, I'm totally invested. And they have a TFSA, but they're not invested. And then other times I have a client come to me and they're like, I've got a mutual fund. I'm like, cool, but what is it invested in? And there's a big disconnect between what is a mutual fund and what is a TFSA. And so think of all of these acronyms. So acronyms are our houses. And just like your friends have different rules in their houses, because my friends had very different rules growing up than my house, TFSA, RRSP, RESP, they all have a unique set of rules to them for a purpose. And then on the right here, I just have some other ones that you could potentially have seen the acronyms for. And so next, what I want you to visualize is our vehicles. So now you can go park a Tesla, you can go park your Toyota in anybody's house, but they're all a little bit different. So here is a list of the different types of investments you may have heard of or seen, very generically. So, and I did do this on a risk scale just to help with the visualization. So we have cash, bonds, and GICs. Those are our lower risk investments. Sorry, cash is not an investment, as I had mentioned. So just scratch, but cash. Market-linked GICs are a really cool product that's a hybrid between a guaranteed investment and you get to dabble in the market. And then we have mutual funds, ETFs, and SEG funds, which are similar, and Crystal's going to get into that in more detail, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. But what I want you to take home from these ones particularly is that they are an incredibly well-diversified investment because it's a basket, and it's a basket in a good way. So it's not just like you're putting all your eggs in Tesla. You're putting all your eggs in maybe one mutual fund, maybe it's a few mutual funds, but you're spreading your risk across hundreds of companies in different sectors in different countries. Again, we get into that a little more after. So moving on, I started touching on this. Diversification is one of the next most important things that is overlooked. So having a mutual fund, an ETF, is a really good start compared to just picking a random stock because Joe down the street said it was a good buy. Again, you touched on that. So that's a really good thing, but we want to take a broader lens to that and be like, well, what kind of mutual fund is it? What is it invested in? And we're not like completely analyzing every single decision that is being made. That's actually not our job. That is the guy at the top who is at a desk with, you know, a team of hundreds of people around him with all those analytical charts and like just as, if you've ever seen it, Google it. Thank you. Yeah. It's insane. That's his job. But our job is to make sure that you're not just, say, picking a US mutual fund. Again, you may be spread out among lots of different US companies in different sectors of different sizes, but if you're only in the US and the US tanks, we're not diversified and our eggs are not spread out. So this is where those layers come in. It's not just a one-stop shop and one size fits all. There's additional complexities here. And this is where the power and value of advice also comes in. So this is just a few of the main diversification areas that you should be considering. Geography, again, I mentioned like US, it also currency. So you want Canadian, you want US, you want international, we want to spread it out. Size of company, it's not always the big guys that just knock it out of the park. Sometimes it's the little guys, so we want a piece of that too. Industries, tech is so hot right now. But that doesn't mean it should be what you're completely invested in. Because what if all of a sudden tomorrow, like renewable energy takes off, right? What if all of a sudden it's financials, meaning like banks and institutions? So we want to make sure, again, we're spreading those eggs out. This is where I don't want to lose you. I swear it's good. Asset allocation. This is one of the biggest things when it comes to, there's a lot of noise right now with DIY investing. And I'm not saying that you can't DIY invest and take things into your own hands. I think it's, again, a right situation depending on the human being. But what's often overlooked is that if you were to get advice today and have a beautiful, well-diversified portfolio, but then never talk to that advisor again, that's actually not going to do you well. And this comes down to, remember when I was talking about risk and how it changes the closer you get to retirement? So we want to change how risky we're being with our investments. This is why. So asset allocation is something that we should be continuously looking at based on your timeline, which impacts our risk. So the closer you get to retirement, what you're going to notice, so the pink one here, just as a refresher, if you can't see the names, those are our equities, stocks, baskets of stocks, not individual companies. As we age, we're slowly going to reduce that because that's our highest risk. And we're slightly going to transition into our fixed income, which are those guaranteed investments. They're not going to make us really excited, but they're going to do the job. They're still going to help us outpace inflation, but they're going to protect our investments when we need them to, when we need to draw on them. So as we get closer to retirement, you'll notice how it slowly shifts every 10 years. And again, this illustrates the importance of long-term advice and sticking with an advisor, or if you're doing it yourself, that at least you are the one doing this for yourself and making sure that you're making changes as necessary. And then again, the name of the event today is Investing Decoded, because there's a lot of noise in the world when it comes to you shouldn't invest with an advisor because you're going to lose $500,000 if you do that. Like that is literally things that are out there right now. And there's a lot of misinformation around that. People really like to pick and choose which stats they're using. So this is a general idea / opinion. So take it with a grain of salt, because you can have a kick butt.
Great. Good job.
Thank you. You can have a kick butt advisor at the bank. How to put this? I was one. I was. And that's when people were like, Sam, why are you here? Like, you should not be at the bank.
They don't stay long enough.
Exactly.
And then you get comfortable with them, and then they move on.
Exactly, right? So with all due respect, that's why we have hit or miss. Again, fees can vary, and Crystal's going to get into that on a deeper level, so don't get too hung up on it. But I'm a visual person. I'm like, tell it to me straight. This gives you a general idea. And what I want to hone in on, again, I see a lot of the times people are with an investment-only advisor. So think of like your Edward Jones, for instance, because that's just a big one people hear about. He's going to sell you an investment, and he could be doing a good job. I'll admit, like, he could go through diversification and asset allocation, and he could call you a few times a year. He could be a good guy. But at the end of the day, he's giving you investment advice. Investment advice is only as good as your holistic picture. Because how can we make effective recommendations without knowing what your goals are, what your timeline is, what your family circumstances are? The decision could actually mean thousands and thousands of dollars at the end of the day. It could be an opportunity you miss out on. And so it's imperative. And it's okay if you have an investment guy and you're like, I'm not leaving him. Okay. Kinda. But then
get to be forever.
Yeah. But get someone on your team who's going to do the planning. And a really good example of this is private wealth. So private wealth, and because I worked in private wealth, this is why I really want to speak to it. For the most part, is pretty good. I work for IG, just as an example. And the thing about IG is, if you are actively working with that advisor, I will argue that they are absolutely worth the fees. Because they do insurance, they do investments, and they're calling you multiple times. But that's if your advisor is doing that. And so the conversation, no matter if it's private wealth, if it's an investment advisor or the bank, it's not necessarily how much are they charging, it's what are you getting for it? And are you getting the value out of it? Because I argue that anybody is worth their fee if the value is there. But if it isn't there, that's when you need to question it. And that's where sometimes private wealth, and then depending on how much they do, maybe they are the investment experts, but they can work hand in hand with your financial planner. And that would be a really synergistic relationship. And I don't want to spoil alert, but Crystal will also be getting into that, because we'll be talking about one of Holden Taylor's private wealth partners here and the incredible relationship that they've done. And so the last fun facts of the day I'm going to leave you with. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is today. So cheesy, I know, but hopefully it inspires you to take action, because again, as we learned, like this is the third time we're saying it, action is better than inaction, no matter what. And even if you only have 5 years left, it is better to start now. Investing is for everyone. Argue me otherwise. You don't need to be debt-free to start investing is one of the most common misconceptions. It's about finding a balance. And again, that's where working with an advisor who can understand your deeper goals can make the proper suggestions. And a good example of this is, again, rates are a big thing. How expensive is your debt versus what you could be making in the market? But it's also, you can't get time back when it comes to that compounding growth and growing your money over a period of time. So sometimes we need to make that decision. And then this is really cool. Again, I mentioned I like math. If you like math and you like motivation, investments double every 7 to 10 years depending on your rate of return. It's called the rule of 72. So if you know that, like, you pull up your investment statement and you're like, my average return over the last 10 years is 7%, then you do 72 divided by 7%, and that's going to tell you how many years, and it's about 10, it will double. And I like to know that. When will my 100 grand turn into 200 grand? Or maybe you're starting with 1,000. And again, there's no shame in that. Everybody has to start somewhere. But math. And then it's not timing the market, but time in the market. So again, I have to go back to what Brianna said. If you're hearing about an investment from Joe down the road or from YouTube or Reddit, which I love YouTube and Reddit, but if you're hearing about it, it's quite possible it's too late. So do not attempt to time to buy at the right time or sell at the right time, because that is just not possible for the average human being. And again, I like things black and white. So this is a really fun little checklist for yourself to consider no matter where you're at in your current investing journey. I want you, no matter what, to be educated and get educated. Even if you have that tendency where you're like, I just want to hand it over and you just do it and I don't want anything to be a part of it, I encourage you to be a part of it. You don't need to know everything, absolutely, and that is why you have an advisor. But you absolutely should understand the why. It's only in your best interest. Because then here's the example. Say you have an incredible relationship with your advisor. I'll just use you, Crystal. You love Crystal, who doesn't? And Crystal's awesome and she's giving you all this advice and maybe you haven't seen her in a while though. And all of a sudden you're in a room with a bunch of people who have a different opinion. That can be a really tricky place to be. And it can actually be really, again, bandwagon effect, can be really easy to almost be like, are they right or is Crystal right? And you know how you know? Is to be a part of the process and be educated along the way. And so that means listening to Crystal when she's explaining to you why you're doing certain things, why she's recommending a certain investment, why you're paying a certain fee. Make sure that you're involved in that process.
Also ask questions, right? If we say something that doesn't jive, or we use acronyms because we're terrible at that and we try not to, just ask a question. There's no stupid question. You're never going to be frowned upon for asking.
Yeah. You wouldn't, and again, this is probably a really good example to that. You wouldn't believe the people, like it's often the wealthiest who may not know what a TFSA is. It's not, people always think that it's the wealthiest who have everything together. It's not. It's different across the board. And there's no shame in that. So ask, don't be afraid. You know, and again, there's so much information out there these days. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation, especially with the popularization of social media. It's really easy for things to get misconstrued and there's not a lot of consequence for the people who are putting that information out there. So do your due diligence. Because again, this goes back to the very, very beginning. No one else is going to come and do it for you. You have to take that into your own hands. Choose your advisor. At the end of the day, it is 100% your choice who you work with, what you pay or don't pay them, and how you work with them. So make sure you choose someone you like. Make sure you choose someone you want to work with long-term, someone you trust. Understand your investor persona. Again, high-risk carrot. At the end of the day, understand why you are what you are, though. Because an example of this, I may say, I think you have 20 years, 30 years until retirement, you should be a high-risk carrot. And you're like, Sam, I understand everything you're saying, but it still makes me want to throw up, and I'm not going to sleep at night. That's that conversation of should make sense, but that doesn't mean it does. And we have that conversation together. Allocate strategically. So that means, you know, time over time that we're rebalancing our portfolio when we need to. We're diversified. One of the biggest things that I see is that we're not well enough diversified. Sometimes one mutual fund just won't cut it. And I think I've beat whatever the analogy is with this, but a custom portfolio of stocks is not it. Okay, again, I have to share this example. I recently lost both of my grandparents, like the same set of grandparents within a year of each other. My grandma was an accountant and she handled all of their money. And when she first passed, we went to look, I got brought into the picture, you could probably guess. And we go to look at it and everyone's thinking like grandma's stuff is tight, right? And she literally had an investment guy. I don't want to drop names at investment firms, it was like 4 stocks. It also wasn't even like, if you're going to individually pick stocks, like let's go a little deeper. It was like 4 stocks. And then I pull up her year over year investment paperwork, her statements. Same thing, last 20 years. That is not a well-diversified portfolio. Not to mention everything was in her name. They did not split between the two of them. So what happened was everything transferred to my grandpa at death, tax-free, woohoo. But when my grandpa died within a year and we didn't have time to make any strategic decisions, you know what happened to all of that money that they saved their butts off for? Yeah. And that is heartbreaking. So that is where it comes in. Make sure you don't just have an investment guy. Make sure you are getting advice no matter your profession, no matter your expertise. And I mentioned rebalance. So that's Investing 101. Like I mentioned, I'm doing some really exciting work with Holden Taylor here, but I still have my company, Worthy of Wealth. I'm really passionate about where coaching meets planning. You can find out more about me on, these are some of my offers. One really cool thing I do as well is a lot of events and retreats. Again, so different than what anybody has seen in the finance world. And if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. You can scan this QR code here for more information about me, but that is a super high level introduction to Investing 101. I'm sure you guys, no matter your breadth of experience, can understand it's quite a complex topic, so I hope that you had some good takeaways from this. And if you do have any questions while they're hot on your mind, I'll just remind you that we have these Q&A QR codes around the room, and during that time we can get into more depth about like something like Sam, like I really don't know what a TFSA is. We'll definitely spend time and we can explain that for you. So now we're gonna go into our break period. And before you all get up and go get more snacks and what do you call it?
A bio break.
A bio break. Love that. We have 2 QR codes here, one of which we want you to do both. Yeah. Janae will find you. Yeah. So Janae would absolutely love if everybody could submit a question. And then when we get into Crystal's presentation, we're gonna have a poll come up. We're gonna show you the results of this poll, which is asking how are you invested.
It's not gonna say who you are, so
yes.
it's not like,
It's no completely anonymous, and you can select different things. So we have ETFs, SEG funds, mutual funds, GICs, haven't started investing, whatever it is, we would love to hear from you. And the reason why we would love to hear from you is not just out of curiosity. I actually would like to show support to other people in the room that you are not alone, and also from a point of interest. Because again, another example, there's some bad hate on mutual funds right now. And I'm interested to see the poll results, but you can probably see quite a lot of people are invested in mutual funds. Probably a few people haven't started, and that's okay. But I encourage you just to fill that out when you have time.